The night had been suffocatingly still, the kind of silence that presses down like a heavy stone on the chest. I lay awake, listening to the faint scraping sounds beyond the thin walls of our hut, sounds that prickled at my skin like the whisper of a desert wind. It was Jamal. I knew it before I opened my eyes. He was moving, restless and desperate, moving with a purpose that frightened me. By the faint glow of the oil lamp outside, I slipped from my bed and crept toward the door. The village was sleeping, wrapped in the brittle quiet that drought had carved into every corner. I stepped outside, the cold desert air biting at my skin, and found Jamal crouched beside the granary, hastily stuffing a small bundle with meager belongings. His hands shook, betraying the calm he tried to hold. "Jamal," I whispered, my voice barely carrying in the stillness. He jumped, startled, turning sharply to face me. His dark eyes bore into mine, fierce and haunted. "Mira," he said, voice low and urgent, "I can't stay here anymore. I can't breathe in this place. The silence, the waiting, it's killing me." I stepped closer, my heart pounding. "But what about the promise, the jars, the rain? We have to believe," Father said. He cut me off, running a hand through his tangled hair. "Father's promises are dust, Mira. Just like these jars. No rain is coming. We were wasting our lives on shadows." His words were sharp, cruel in their honesty, but beneath them I sensed something more: fear, sorrow, a deep exhaustion born from years of watching hope wither. "Don't you see?" I said, voice trembling. "If we give up now, then what are we? Just empty shells like the cracked jars after the last storm. We have to hold on for all of us." He looked away, his jaw clenched. "I'm not like you. I can't carry this weight." The wind began to stir, carrying with it the scent of dry earth and distant sun. The village lay behind us, still and fragile, but the desert stretched out ahead, endless, merciless. "Please, Jamal," I pleaded. "Don't go. We need you here. We need each other." His eyes softened for a fleeting moment, but the restlessness returned like a tide. "I have to find my own path," he said, turning toward the dunes. "Maybe beyond this emptiness there's something else." I reached out, grasping his arm. "Then come back to us. Don't let the silence swallow you whole." He hesitated, then shook free gently. "I'll try, but I can't promise anything." And with that, he vanished into the pale light of dawn, swallowed by the desert's vast embrace. I stood there long after he was gone, the weight of his absence pressing down on me. The jars, my silent prayers, felt heavier than ever. Yet beneath the a stubborn flame flickered. If Jamal could leave, then perhaps I had to be the one to stay, to carry the hope that refused to die. Morning came slow and dusty. I found Lina by the well, her hands folded in her lap, eyes distant but kind. She said nothing about Jamal's flight, but the sadness in her gaze spoke volumes. We shared a quiet, understanding. Loss was a companion we both knew too well. That day, the village felt fractured, the air thick with unspoken fears. Elder Kader's words echoed in my mind, his cold pragmatism a sharp contrast to the fragile dreams I guarded. But as the sun climbed higher, I gathered the jars, each one a testament to the promise that still lived within me. Jamal's escape was a crack in the village's fragile veneer, but it was not the end. It was a challenge, a reckoning. And I knew, deep inside, that the choice was mine: to surrender to the desert's silence, or to nurture the faint flicker of hope that might one day bring the rain back to our thirsty land. As night fell again, I sat among the jars, their dusty surfaces catching the pale moonlight. I whispered to them, to the memory of my father, to the spirit of the village, and to Jamal, wherever he might be. "Hold on," I said softly. "Hold on to hope." The desert wind answered with a mournful sigh, and I closed my eyes, willing the dawn to bring something new. A promise beyond sight, waiting just beyond the horizon. The morning air was cool, carrying a fragile promise of change that seemed almost out of place in a village so deeply entrenched in drought and despair. Mira woke before dawn, the soft rustle of linen and the familiar creak of the wooden door stirring her from restless sleep. Outside, the desert sky was just beginning to lighten, pale streaks of pink and gold threading through the lingering night. The village was still. No children's laughter, no calls to labor, only the low murmur of wind sweeping across the cracked earth. She found Lena already awake, seated on the rough-hewn stone bench just outside their small home. The older woman's hands were wrapped around a chipped ceramic cup, breath rising in gentle puffs as she sipped the bitter herbal tea they had managed to prepare. Lena looked up as Mira approached, her eyes soft but tired, bearing the weight of countless seasons of drought and sorrow. "Did you sleep?" Lena asked quietly, her voice a warm balm against the cold morning. "Not well," Mira admitted, settling beside her. "I heard voices in the village last night. Jamal's return has stirred unrest." Lina nodded, her gaze distant. "It is not easy for him, or for any of us. The desert changes us all in ways we cannot always understand." Mira traced patterns in the dust with her fingers, the fine grains slipping through her hands like fragile memories. "I worry for him. For all of us. The village feels like it's unraveling. That is why we must hold fast," Lena said, her tone steady. "Not just to the hope your father gave us, but to each other. You are stronger than you know, Mira, and we will face this together." The words were simple, but they carried a deep certainty that anchored Mira's heart. She looked up to see the first hints of sunlight painting the horizon, a fragile glow that seemed to echo Lina's steady resolve. Later that day, the village square became a stage for the simmering tensions wrought by Jamal's absence and sudden return. The young man, lean and dust-streaked, appeared at the edge of the gathering crowd, his posture guarded yet defiant. Murmurs rippled through the villagers, some curious, others wary, and a few openly hostile. Jamal's eyes scanned the faces around him, searching for recognition, for forgiveness, for a place to belong once again. The drought had carved deep lines of fear and frustration into the community, and his departure had been a wound that reopened with his arrival. Mira watched from a distance, feeling the weight of every whispered word and sidelong glance. She remembered the confrontation when he had fled, his anger, his desperation to escape the suffocating hopelessness. Now his return was a test not just for him, but for the fragile bonds that held the village together. As voices grew louder, Elder Cadus stepped forward, his stern face shadowed by the midday sun. "We cannot afford distractions," he said sharply, his gaze locking onto Jamal's. "Our survival depends on unity and acceptance of our reality, not on chasing dreams that wither like the plants under this merciless sun." The crowd shifted uneasily. Some nodded in agreement, others averted their eyes. Mira felt a tightening in her chest, a mixture of fear and resolve. Stepping forward, she raised her voice, soft but clear. "We have known despair, yes," she said, "but we also have known hope. My father's promise is not just a dream, it is a calling. We carry it in these jars, in our stories, and in the strength we find in each other. We cannot let fear silence us." A hush fell, the tension hanging thick in the air. Lina stood beside Mira, a steady presence that lent the girl courage. Jamal's expression softened, a flicker of something like understanding passing between them. The day waned, but the echoes of that gathering lingered. Mira wandered through the village streets, her footsteps light on the cracked earth. She paused before the rows of dust jars, their delicate glass catching the golden light of the setting sun. Each jar was a testament of faith, of memory, of the promise that sustained them. In the solitude, Mira felt the weight of her responsibilities settle upon her shoulders. No longer just a child clutching at hope, she was becoming something more, a keeper of legacy, a bearer of light amidst the gathering shadows. As night fell, the village held its breath. The drought remained unbroken, the sky silent, but beneath the surface, a quiet stirring began. Bonds were tested, wounds exposed, and yet, through it all, the fragile flame of hope flickered stubbornly against the dark. Mira returned home to Lena's waiting embrace, the steady rhythm of her heartbeat a reminder that even the harshest desert could cradle life, and with it, the promise of rain yet to come. And so, as the stars blinked awake in the vast desert sky, Mira's journey continued rooted in dust, sustained by memory, and driven by a hope that refused to fade. The gathering storm was visible long before it reached us. A churning mass of ochre and grey that blotted out the sun and drew a line between the brittle earth and the darkening sky. I stood at the edge of our village, the coarse sand shifting beneath my feet, the air thickening with the scent of dust and impending rain that never came. My heart hammered not just from the heat or the dry wind that sliced through the cracked ground, but from the weight of what was to come. Around me, the other villagers hurried, their movements sharp and hurried like the beating wings of frightened birds. Mothers gathered their children, fastening clothes and securing haphazard shelters. Men strapped bundles of wood and stone against the wind's rising roar. Yet beneath the surface of this frantic preparation lay a deeper tension, a simmering mixture of fear, frustration, and a fragile hope that I clung to with trembling fingers. Inside our humble home, Lena moved quietly but purposefully. Her hands, worn from years of toil and worry, worked at securing the small window shutters with strips of cloth and rope. The light inside flickered as the wind rattled the brittle walls and rattled the jars lined carefully on the shelf. Each jar held not water, but the fine dust of our village, my collection, my prayer, my rebellion against the relentless drought. They were fragile vessels, delicate and silent, yet to me, they were the heartbeats of a promise my father had made long ago. Mira, Lena said softly, her voice steady even as her eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. We must be ready. This one feels different. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I will protect the jars. She reached out, her fingers brushing my cheek in a rare moment of tenderness. And I will protect you. Outside, the wind rose to a howl, carrying with it the bitter taste of sand and the voices of the unsettled village. In the square, I saw Jamal, his lean frame silhouetted against the gathering storm. His eyes, sharp and restless, met mine for a brief moment before he turned and began a heated exchange with Elder Kadir. Their voices rose above the wind, a clash of raw emotion and hardened pragmatism. This storm will destroy everything. Kadir's voice was low but firm, his stern face set like stone. We cannot waste our strength on illusions. Jamal's reply was fiery, laced with the desperation of youth. Without hope, we are already dead. We must fight for what little we have left. The argument was more than words. It was the fracture line of our village's soul. Between the stoic elder and the defiant youth lay the future of our people, fragile as the jars of dust I guarded. As the first grains of sand whipped past my face, I gathered the jars into my arms, wrapping each one carefully in cloth. I traced the smooth glass with my fingers, feeling the coolness despite the heat, as if drawing strength from the dust within. The storm's roar grew louder, a relentless drumbeat that echoed the pounding of my heart. That night, as the village huddled in their homes, the wind battered our fragile shelters. The storm was merciless, a swirling tempest that seemed intent on erasing the last traces of life and hope from our battered land. Yet amid the chaos, I felt a quiet flame within me, a stubborn flicker of belief that these jars, these silent witnesses, would endure. I whispered a promise to the night sky, to the dust, to the memory of my father. I would not let his hope die. No matter the storm, no matter the silence of the sky, I would carry this legacy forward. For in the heart of the gathering storm, I found the strength to stand, to protect, and to believe. As dawn approached, the winds began to wane, leaving behind a battered but unbroken village. The jars, wrapped and guarded, remained intact, a fragile testament to the endurance of faith in the face of unrelenting despair. And as I looked out over the scarred earth, I knew that whatever came next, the spirit of our people, anchored by memory and hope, would not be so easily extinguished. But the question lingered, heavy as the dust on the wind: would this fragile unity be enough to weather the trials ahead? Or was our village destined to crumble beneath the weight of a sky that refused to weep? I held the jars close, feeling their weight, and vowed to face whatever came with the quiet courage of a girl who believed in rain though she had never seen it fall. The desert wind howled like a beast unleashed, whipping the sands into a frenzy that swallowed the village whole. Mira clutched a cracked jar to her chest, her fingers numb. Her breath ragged as the storm's fury battered the fragile homes and shattered the brittle calm that had settled over the land for so long. The sky, long silent and indifferent, now roared with rage, a tempest that threatened to erase every memory of the gentle rains her father had promised. She stumbled through the choking haze, each step a battle against the suffocating swirl of dust and grit. The jars she had so meticulously collected, each a sacred testament to hope, clinked and rattled in her arms. Her heart pounded as she glimpsed the village square, transformed into a tumult of flapping cloth, splintering wood, and terrified faces pressed against the storm's relentless assault.
Mira!
Hold fast. Lina's voice pierced the chaos, steady and strong. Mira turned, eyes searching through the sand-blind veil, to see her mother struggling with a broken beam, her weathered hands steady despite the gale. Jamal appeared beside her, reckless and fierce, his eyes wild but determined, grasping a fallen jar and pressing it to his chest. The storm was a living thing, a cruel reminder of nature's indifference. It tore through the village's defenses, scattering the dust jars like fragile stars cast to the earth. Mira's heart shattered as she saw one jar break, the dust spilling out and mingling with the endless sand, hope dissolving into despair. Her knees buckled. She sank to the ground, the weight of loss crushing her spirit. In that moment, the storm seemed endless, the silence of the sky an echo of her father's absence. Tears blurred her vision, but amid the ruin, a quiet stillness settled the eye of the storm, a fragile bubble of calm. Closing her eyes, Mira breathed deeply, summoning the memory of her father's gentle voice, the warmth of his faith amidst the draught's harshness. The rain will return, he had whispered, not always in the way we expect, but it will come, carried by the seeds of belief we nurture. In the stillness, she felt something stir deep within, a flicker of light against the overwhelming dark. A resolve, fragile yet fierce, took root. She rose, the cracked jars pressed close, a guardian of memory amidst chaos. "We cannot let this be the end," she called out, voice steady despite the storm's roar. One by one, villagers emerged from the wreckage, drawn by her unwavering spirit. Elder Kader, stooped and grim, approached with wary eyes, his skepticism challenged by the flicker of hope in Mira's gaze. Together, they gathered what remained, the shattered jars and scattered dust becoming symbols not of defeat, but of endurance. The storm would pass, the rain might not come today, but the legacy of belief, the fragile flame of hope, would not be extinguished. Mira stood against the swirling sands, a solitary figure framed by the storm's fury, her heart beating a stubborn rhythm of faith. The desert might be silent, the sky empty, but within her, the promise of rain lived on beyond sight, beyond fear, a promise waiting to be fulfilled. The storm howled anew, but Mira's voice rose above it, a beacon in the tempest. We endure, we believe, we wait. And in the eye of the storm, hope was reborn. The storm had passed, but it left behind a silence far heavier than the howling winds that had ripped through our village hours before. Dawn arrived cloaked in a dull grey light, as if the sky itself remained too wary to summon the sun's full warmth. I stepped outside my small shelter, the sand still swirling faintly in the air, settling like a shroud over every surface. Homes stood battered, their walls scarred by wind-blown shards of stone and dried wood. The gathering place where we once met was reduced to a skeleton of broken beams and scattered debris. My feet sank into the loose sand as I made my way through the village, each step a reminder of the fragile world we inhabited. My jars were my burden and my balm. I searched among the ruins for the containers I had so carefully collected, each one a silent prayer, a shard of hope encased in glass. Some lay shattered, their dusty contents spilled and mingling with the earth beneath. Others stood cracked, trembling like the delicate faith that held our village together. I knelt beside one such jar, the glass etched with fine fissures that caught the dim light. My fingers traced the fragile fractures, careful not to worsen the damage. "Father," I whispered, the name a soft echo in the vast emptiness. "I will keep your promise alive. I will be the rain you dreamed of, the hope you planted in this dust." The wind caught my words and carried them away, scattering them like seeds across the barren land. Around me, the village began to stir. Figures emerged from broken doorways and crumbled shelters, faces smudged with dirt and lines etched deeper by exhaustion and sorrow. Lena peered beside me, her eyes glassy with tears that she did not shed. She wrapped her arms around me, a silent offer of comfort that steadied my trembling heart. "We must gather the people," she said quietly. "They need to see that we are still here, that this is not an end, but a beginning." Jamal came then, his lean frame silhouetted against the dim light. His intense gaze met mine, and in that moment I saw not the restless youth who once challenged my faith, but a kindred spirit, scarred but unbroken. He nodded slowly, a silent promise to stand beside me. Together, we moved through the village, rallying those who would listen. The cracked jars became symbols not of defeat but of endurance, each one a testament to the resilience of our people. Elder Cadius stood apart, his stern features softened by an unspoken respect as he watched the fragile stirrings of hope rekindle. The day stretched on, filled with the quiet sounds of rebuilding, the scraping of hands clearing debris, murmurs of encouragement. The careful gathering of broken shards to be preserved as relics of what was endured. Though the sky remained obstinately dry, the spirit beneath it began to breathe anew. As night fell, I stood once more among my jars, their dusty contents shimmering under the pale moonlight. The storm had taken much from us, but it had not stolen our will to believe. And as the wind whispered through the shattered earth, I allowed myself a small, fierce hope that one day the rain would return, and when it did, these jars would fill and overflow, carrying the promise of renewal to every corner of our village. But until that day, I would keep watch. I would be the rain collector's daughter, the keeper of memory and hope, standing firm against the silence of the sky. This was not the end. It was the first breath of what might yet come. And so we wait, as the desert waits, holding its breath for a storm that may yet bring life. The sun had begun its slow descent, casting long shadows over the brittle earth of our village. The air was thick with the scent of dust and quiet longing, the very breath of the desert that had become both our home and our prison. I moved carefully among the scattered jars, their surfaces dull but unbroken, each one a fragile vessel holding not water, but the dust of our land, the memory of rain that had once kissed our thirsty soil. The jars were silent witnesses to our endurance, their fragile glass reflecting the fading light like muted stars fallen to earth. I knelt beside a jar with a small chip along its rim, tracing the crack with a finger as if by touch I could mend the fracture. This jar had survived the sandstorm, though barely. Like us, it bore the scars of hardship but refused to surrender. It was in moments like these I felt closest to my father, to the promises he had made beneath skies that no longer wept. His faith had been a flicker in the darkness, and now it was mine to carry. Lena's footsteps approached softly behind me. I did not turn immediately. Her presence was a balm, steady and sure. When I finally looked up, her weathered face held a quiet strength that I relied on more than I could say. She settled beside me, her hand resting gently on my shoulder. The touch was warm, a tether to the world beyond my swirling thoughts. "They are still here," she said softly, nodding to the jars, like us, holding on. I nodded, the weight of her words sinking deep. "I will keep them safe, Mama. I promise." Her eyes mirrored my resolve, but also the sorrow of a heart that had seen too much loss. "You are strong, Mira. Stronger than you know." Outside the small cluster of our home, Jamal's restless shadow moved near the village's edge. The wind lifted strands of his dark hair as he paced. The tension in his frame softened for a moment when our eyes met. His usual defiance was tempered by something new, a hesitant respect that had grown since the storm passed. He stopped, then approached with slow, measured steps. "You still believe," he said, voice low, almost uncertain. I met his gaze steadily. "I have to. Without hope, what are we?" He shrugged, a flicker of a smile ghosting his lips. "Maybe you rewrite. Maybe there's something in those jars after all." The village square was stirring as well. Small groups gathered in the twilight, voices hushed but filled with a cautious optimism that felt foreign yet welcome. The air seemed to hum with the beginnings of something fragile, a shared will to rebuild, to reclaim what had been lost. I watched as Lena joined a circle of women, her words weaving comfort and strength, while elders and young alike exchanged tentative plans for the days ahead. The drought still clung to us like a shadow, but beneath it, a pulse of life stirred anew. As night fell, I returned to the jars, their outlines dark against the soft glow of lanterns. They held the dust of our past, the promise of our future. In their silence, I heard the whispered prayers of my father and the heartbeat of a village refusing to fade. I knew the road ahead would be long and uncertain, but with every jar I guarded, every story I passed on, I nurtured the fragile flame of hope. It was a gift and a burden, but one I would bear as long as breath filled my lungs. Because hope, like the rain, might not come when we wish, but it lives unseen, unfelt, yet unyielding, waiting for the moment it can fall again.